Before we jump into this episode with Chris Hunt from Code of the West, here's something for those who want to go deeper. The Silvercore Club gives you access to our private podcast, The Outpost, plus free courses, insurance, exclusive gear discounts, and it's an RCMP-approved gun club for license issuance and renewal. If you value growth, preparedness, and community, check it out at silvercore.ca. All right, on with the podcast. You're going to enjoy this one. I'm joined today by an artist, storyteller, and man on a mission. After years in the creative world, including time at Black Rifle Coffee, he stepped away to build something deeply personal. What started as a simple Instagram page became a movement. He's the creator of Code of the West, a modern guide to living with honor, grit, and purpose in a world that often forgets those things. His work strikes a chord because it's not theory, it's lived experience. Loss, risk, growth, and a refusal to quit. Welcome to the Silvercore podcast, Chris Hunt.
God, kind of made me emotional. Like I don't think of myself in that way often. I mean, that wasn't inaccurate, but but it's
brother, that's you.
Yeah, it's just yeah. I mean, it's me, but it's I'm sure you kind of can relate where like when you're just in your own head, you're just chopping wood and carrying water, so you don't necessarily stop to think that what you're doing has any any value outside of just the activity that you're doing.
Have you must have a sense of the amount of impact that you're having on other people's lives with your book, with your page. People must be writing in and giving you background on how their lives are better just because of what you're putting out. Man,
I'm probably gonna cry at some point during this, just so you know. Yeah, I get that sense. People send me a lot of DMs now, and kind of goes back to what I was saying just now, about the intro. I felt compelled to do this, and I did it with the intention of hoping that I would help people, because part of Code of the West is just, this is the way I found my way back from things. And then I learned a long time ago, but it took a long time for me to kind of gain the courage, kind of like a puppy learning how to bark for the first time. That just sharing and letting people know that they're not necessarily the only ones experiencing something can have a lot of value to it. So without getting too personal with any of the people who sent stuff in, I get a lot of notes about people who didn't punch their own card out because of Code of the West. And then I get a lot of just notes from people who are just, it's interesting because it's not like people who are saying like, I'm fixed now. It's people saying, I'm kind of staying, I'm sticking around, and it's more like the framework aspect of things, which is something that I've certainly started talking more about with Code of the West. It's not just the guru thing, which I'm not against inherently, especially on social media, that like if you do this, you'll fix that. And it's like, that's not bad if you're looking for something and finding a solution that gets the ball rolling. Great, but I think it's, I'm trying to not to have a potty mouth. I'm trying not to have a potty mouth and not cry. It becomes snake oily, I think, when you just say this will solve your problem. And for me, there was nothing that solved my problem other than just this quiet evolution of myself that had to continually occur and play out. And so I think outside of the fact that people just sending in those notes is pretty powerful to me. It's the fact that like how they're responding is not so much like, thank you for fixing something. It's more like, thank you for pointing out that there's a way out without necessarily addressing or specifying a destination.
I think there's a danger to the idea of fixing something, because that presupposes that we're broken. And oftentimes we're in places. There you go. Well, I mean, oftentimes we're going to be people say, I want to be happy. I want to be successful. I want to be, you name it. And they'll set that as their North Star that they're going to work towards. And that's an unachievable goal. When they start realizing that happiness is a byproduct of the process, you can never be happy. You can never just say, I'm going to be happy, because it puts that carrot in front of you, and it's always going to be dangling in front of you.
It's not quantifiable.
But it's not quantifiable, because what is happy today is going to be different from what's happy tomorrow, just like pain. I love that quote from The Simpsons, where Lisa's like, "This is the worst day of my life. It's so bad," and Homer says, "Oh, sweetie, it's the worst day of your life so far."
Yeah, which reminds me of a different Simpsons quote that I feel like actually sums up my life pretty well. Which is, "How does it taste, Ralph? It tastes like burning."
It tastes like burning. That's right. Oh, I love that. Well, you said Code of the West helped bring you back. Mm-hmm. Where were you?
It was a place that was way too comfortable for as uncomfortable as it was. I mean, I would say the place that I was at was almost like an overlap of two different states and places in my life, because I've always been I've always been very sovereign minded. I've always wanted to have my independence. I've always wanted to kind of do my own thing since a very early age. And that led to this willingness to go to ambiguous places and choose ambiguous paths, like choosing to be a comic book creator. There's still no path to that. You just figure it out if you want to do it. But overlapping with that, so that was a lot of drive and a lot of myopic obsession to get somewhere. In line with that, I had my own challenges and difficulties growing up, but I had my first sort of real adult, or actually I'd just say real life challenge, when I had a couple of friends that died real close to each other when I was in my mid-20s. And just the quick version of that is one of them got diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he'd kind of hidden himself, and I went with a friend, and we literally I threatened to kick the door in on his apartment if he didn't open it. And he opened it, and he looked like a Holocaust victim. And so we got him to go to the hospital, and he just got diagnosed with terminal cancer there. And then a same friend group, a different friend, I called him and was like, "Hey, Lauren's going to die. You should come home soon." And this is a guy who hopped trains, was a busker. We called them traveling kids in Idaho when I was growing up, but like a hobo basically. And so I was like, let me buy you a bus ticket back and come see Lauren, because they say it's going to be like 6 months, and it's not. I just know it's not, and which was true. And he's like, no, I'm going to hop a train back, and I need to think about this. He died on a train coming back outside of Portland. So, which is kind of funny, because Michael was the one that died on the train. He had a habit of living bigger than everybody else. And so when Lauren was dying on a morphine drip, we're like, "Hey, Michael beat you to the punch." He's like, "Fucking Michael." Which is just sort of the nature of our friend group. But that was a part of also this whole thing. And this will make sense in the end. When we got together and found out that Lauren was dying, I basically told everybody, "Look, we can't teach him like a pariah or treat him like a pariah. We got to help him die well, and treat him with the same dark, honest humor that we treat each other all the time with." And so we let him die with dignity as a friend group, but we didn't process anything. And then Michael died in the middle of it. And it just led to this cascading effect, not just for myself, but for pretty much this entire tight-knit friend group. A lot of us are still friends, but it's not the same thing that it was, because we all got tested and challenged. And some of us got through it, some of us didn't, and some of us, it got worse for them, and then they're not here anymore either. It led to this chain of alcoholism and suicide. because these people were really well loved and affected us, because we were all young and didn't expect it to occur. So this is a long way of saying that the place that I was in prior to sort of coming back to this framework that I had as a kid growing up, which is what I call the Code of the West, is I was in this holding two seemingly contradictory things at the same time, which was moving ahead like a freight train in my life for my career, while also just suffering like emotionally and not really understanding how to process this stuff. And both of those sort of put me into a place that I would say was oftentimes confusing activity with achievement, and certainly wasn't me living in a complete way. To sum this up, I would say that like I did not know how to human very well.
I think you're not alone there.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people who don't know how to. Yeah. And it's, you talk about, I really like what you said there. Let him die well. Mm-hmm. And everybody tends to look at how can I live well? Not many people reframe it in a way like, how do I die well? Because really, if you look at it every day, we're marching towards an inevitable outcome. How do we die well? What legacy are we leaving? How are we impacting those around us through our thoughts, words, and actions? And that's where I see Code of the West really helping people. And it's a very interesting, subtle reframe. And when you think about, so you talk about suicide. Suicide sends a very strong message. And one of the more powerful things that I have seen in regards to suicide, it's an individual's ability to try and have complete ownership over a situation. Mm-hmm. Because they feel overwhelmed. They feel like they're not wanted, they're not loved, or the world would be better off without them. But whatever they're feeling, I've never seen that go away when they take their life. It just gets transferred and oftentimes amplified by those around them. Mm-hmm. And that reframe as well, when you think about not how am I living, but how am I dying and what is my impact going to be, that's often enough to keep people thinking like, maybe I should rethink this. Mm-hmm. I don't like this pain, but clearly I must be strong enough if I'm being burdened with these challenges. And if I can overcome these challenges in a way that shows strength, resolve, grit, will I help others in the same way?
That's a framework, though. If you don't have that framework, 100%. It's just pain. Well, it's not just pain, but it's an oversimplification, but I think you know what I mean.
100% I know. Was that the idea when you started Code of the West, or was it a tool that you built for yourself that kind of grew?
It was a byproduct of sort of the mindfulness that I had to employ, and just tricks. I mean, my lack of ability to human well is sort of endemic of just the way my brain works, and I've made it sort of a hobby to try to understand how I might be different. I finally got my brain scanned when I was at Black Rifle. We were going to enlist in this sort of pilot program to use magnetic resonance to help with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. And because everybody I worked with were like Navy SEALs, Green Berets, and combat veterans, like from GWAT. And so I was going to be one of the controls in the in this thing where I put the halo on and they're measuring my alpha, beta, and theta waves. And like
he's the normal one. Come on.
Yeah, when the scientist called me, he's like, yeah. So like we've got some stuff to talk about. And my brain, just as it turned out, which wasn't really news to me, but it was a relief. Was that like it just doesn't work normal. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just doesn't work normal. And so there was a little bit of time before that, really kind of before I came to Black Rifle or went to Black Rifle, where I was starting to realize that, okay, I need to make changes. Like I can't drink half a bottle of bourbon every day just to shut my brain down at night. And sleeping was always a big issue for me. Like, I mean, I have a hobby for the past like 20 years of like figuring out the best methods to go to sleep. And it's taken me almost, I mean, I'll be 40 in a few months. I would say up until I was about 37 to be able to fall asleep within 15 minutes of going to bed. Usually it would take hours, and I mean hours, to go to sleep. And I mean, a lot of that was sort of like exploring meditation and mindfulness techniques and things that were like things that you could do while you were awake, or are often done when they weren't meant to be like, here's how you can go to sleep. It was just me testing things continually, which is also sort of a byproduct of my life. And so the thing that so Code of the West sort of resulted in the intersection of how do I kind of crawl back? Because I crawled for a while, like after Lauren and Michael died, I went and did trail maintenance for a hitch in the Wenatchees, and then immediately went to New York City like 3 weeks later and moved there for comics. So I like literally came from a situation where I was standing next to alpine lakes, watching ridgelines catch on fire from lightning, having conversations with my friend about what do we do? We're 70 miles back. How are we going to get out of this? To like carrying the same Osprey pack into Washington Square Park to get on the subway to go to the apartment I was going to live in. And so there's always been this sort of movement forward that I've had in my life. I would crawl basically, even if I couldn't stand up and walk towards the light or movement. I knew that like, and this is something that got echoed by the people and the friends that I have at Black Rifle now, that movement equals life. Like if you just sit, I mean, I know if you're lost in the woods, you're supposed to kind of sit still, but like, certainly in firefights and that sort of thing, like if you just sit down and give up, you're probably not going to do very well. So it's just, Code of the West is sort of just a confluence of a number of different things, not to mention it just was a way of honoring the people that raised me and how I was raised.
So I'm curious. I've been taking notes as you go through here because I will, my ADHD kicks in and I'm all over the board.
Great.
So trying to keep things.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
I love it. You brought up some important ones that I didn't want to gloss over, and I do want to talk about the childhood one because I think we probably can share some funny stories on that one based on our preamble before we started recording. But sleep. So I was up at around 0200 this morning. I think I got back to sleep around 5 o'clock, and then that's not a normal for me. And then I was up again probably about 7, knowing that I had to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready for the podcast that we're doing here. I've never had a problem falling asleep.
You lucky son of a bitch.
Get a couple. However, staying asleep is a different story. It's very beneficial when I'm out hunting because getting up early, going out, and my mind's going and I'm switched on, and it's like what I do to fall back asleep is probably counter to what the experts would tell you. I'll do puzzles and brain games on my phone, which is number one, stimulation. Number two, it's blue light and you're on a device or whatever it is. But for whatever reason, that's one thing that helps. And then when I'm like, okay, I'm at a point where I can kind of fall asleep. The other thing that I forget where I picked this one up, but I find it useful, is I will hyper concentrate on very small things. For example, I will think about walking out my front door. What does the doorknob feel like? What's the grain of the wood look like and the direction of it? What do the pebbles feel on my bare feet? And like all these, what do I pass next? What do the pillars look like? And I'll concentrate on all of these tiny, tiny little details and try and go as minute as I can. And that, for whatever reason, shuts my brain down, so I'm not thinking about all these other things that are coming in, and it kind of laser focuses it.
Interesting.
What do you do to fall asleep?
That. Pretty much the opposite.
Okay.
That's
really?
One thing interesting, because so one of the things that I learned with that brain scan is that to put it in the most like basic terms, my brain just takes in a shit ton of data. And it does it at a pretty fast clip. It's not an intelligence thing. It's just straight up a data correlation thing. And so what I had to do for a number of years, when I was younger, anyways, I would journal before I went to sleep, and try to get everything out that had lingered, because that's usually what I'd get caught up in these loops of thinking about things. And then as I got older in my life, I was able to engineer my life towards the things that I wanted to do. So, I was writing and drawing comic books, for a long time. That was a dream. So a lot of the anxieties and things that I'd been thinking about that would keep me awake were like the what ifs of the future. So as the future became the present, it became more about it became less about those specific things that I was fixating on, and more of the habit of like, how do I not dwell on things at night? And so I realized over the years that I had to sort of let go of of things as I went to sleep, because I would hyper focus. I would do the thing you're describing by default, and so I had to sort of like figure out a way to. I describe it as like going through the office and turning all the lights off, um, and just sort of like closing up shop for the night, and um,
Mm.
and so I would. It's a distinction. It's so rather than go look for something, I would sort of step away from something, and I would engineer the last few hours of the day to sort of like know how to let go of things. No, I got good at knowing what got hooked me at night, and so I'd
Mm.
be like, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and do the thing that's gonna give me anxiety. Maybe it's sending an email or whatever. But then the actual internal thing that started happening was I have always been interested in meditation just because of the brain stuff that I had going on. And I wanted to be a Jedi
Mm.
growing up. So I wanted to be like Luke
Who
Skywalker.
doesn't?
Yeah, right. I mean, any reasonable
Yeah.
person. So I started using sort of meditation techniques to sort of just like zone out and try to like, because once identified the fact that my brain just didn't want to shut down, or I wasn't accommodating my brain shutting down. Uh, I started
Mm.
finding ways to sort of like create a structured, um, almost like falling backwards, like into like a dead man's float mentally, and
Mm.
so for a long time, what I would do is I'd count backwards from 500, which I know it sounds like really ridiculous, but it would just be something for me. It'd be something that I could like structurally get lost in. Like I didn't have to. It was something that kind of kept me on a track, one thing, while sort of just getting rote. And I eventually just, I can't explain this, but I get to about 470. I'm like, I don't want to go any lower than that. I'm just going to go back over and start over at 500 and start counting back down again. And I'd usually fall
Yeah.
asleep by like the third or fourth time. And then now, this is going to sound kind of funny and I hope not sacrilegious, but like I pray at night instead of doing the numbers thing. And so like I don't always get to the amen, but like I'm basically going. This is my version of the don't fixate on the anxiety. It's more like, what am I grateful for? What am I? Well, mostly that. Like, what am I grateful for? Like, and it's things that are not big. And I think that's part of the reason why before we started recording, where I was like, I don't really know what it's like on the outside of this, because
Mm.
I've fortunately gotten to a point where like I don't give a shit about most of the things that people would probably care about. Um,
Mm.
I sleep in a bed, and I'm glad to have a bed because I've slept in places where I didn't have that. I mean, and you obviously
Mhm.
hunt. I know the value of a comfortable rock when you've worked for 15-hour days going up and down a mountain. Um, and so the things that I think about and pray about, and I have this. I don't like asking for things when I pray. Um, it's more like thinking about like, hey, if I can go in this direction, you know, if I can be of help moving this way, it's more like I'm not trying to trick God or the universe. It's just that like I just realized that like there's things that I like, the bad things get me to the good things. And so I don't have the
Mm.
big picture all the time. So I feel like it's sort of a little rude to ask for specific things because I'm probably silly and not seeing the big picture and don't know. Well, of course I'm not seeing the big picture. So it's more like asking for help to just go where I need to go and being grateful for what I got. Like, most of the time it's like, thanks for knowing that I love dying today. Again, thanks for the bed. Thanks for the fact that I get to walk outside and see Selkirk Mountains in the distance and, go walk across 20 acres of property, on the property that I'm renting for my family. It's stuff like that. And so that's, for some reason, it's a groovy spot. I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's just, I get to say goodnight with God, basically.
That is a groovy spot. And as you describe it, so I've tried the talk backwards thing, the count backwards, but then I'm goal oriented and I'll start again and I'll start again because I lose track, but I got to make it down to 0. And I got this drive that like, I can do this. And it's a weird thing, but it sounds not dissimilar from my process of trying to remember my childhood home and the carpet and what color and the smell. It's taking your mind and hyperfixating on something aside from all of this sensory input that's coming in, because I love to create and I get these crazy ideas that come in at all times, but that hyperfixation process of something that's completely outside of, like, I'm not interested in recreating my childhood home.
Can
right?
I tell you something interesting though? Like along the lines of this? So when I'm drawing and writing, I'll spontaneously have really vivid memories from all over the place, different areas of my life, childhood. And it's like, I'm there, not like in a flashback way, but just remembering it from the first person. And one of the things that happens a lot of times when I go to sleep now is, and this is going to sound really weird, and I hope it doesn't sound like scary, but memories and also, so I'm not a musical person, but 3 things happen a lot of times that I can't explain. One is I'll just start watching things happen. Like I'll start watching memories, and then sometimes I will be listening to music I've never heard before that somehow I'm creating, which I don't know how to even explain this very well, but it's like, it's not like I'm listening to like Lady Gaga as a soundtrack in my head. It's like and maybe it's just the impression I'm listening to music that I've never heard before. And it's not actual music, although I have recordings of waking up and humming it, just because I thought it was interesting. But I'm not a musical person. I love music, but I don't create music. And then sometimes I just go and I watch stories unfold. And it's like, I'm aware of the fact that like, I'm not controlling it. I'm just watching, and I'm not asleep yet. It's like the best way I can put it is there was this sort of like, I always felt like there was a chaos in my brain, when I was trying to go to sleep. There's just shit happening everywhere. And I would try to control it and try to tamp it down. When I basically was like, you know what? I'm just going to get a bucket of popcorn and just look at the chaos. I realized it really wasn't chaos. It was just unstructured things happening. And it was interesting, And so it's like, rather than fight my brain, I just sort of like laid down in the lazy river and just saw what I saw.
That is really cool, because there's something, I don't know, we don't have the answers to everything, and we talk about normal, like what's a right? What's a normal brain?
Hunter, I don't think that we're solving anything.
Well, I mean, if you look at me up top, I'm kind of like a duck right now. My leg is going up and down a mile a minute. I don't belong in confined walls in front of a desk in a situation like this. I'm not. I belong in an area where there's vast space around me. That's when my body tends to calm down. I got all these inputs coming in all the time. I was diagnosed with severe ADHD as a kid. I was put on the highest dosage of Ritalin that they had in the province, apparently, as
hey, well, I mean, you might as well set some records somewhere.
That's right. There you go. It was an experimental run. I took myself off, but I was from grade 3 to grade 7, took myself off cold turkey. I'm like, that's it. I'm done with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the inputs that we have coming in is, sometimes you look at it like how much is actually unique thought? How much is us seeing something or reinterpolating something, or we don't have the luxury that people way back in the day, the ancient Greeks, would sit around and philosophize and just think on singular subjects for long periods of time. And it'll come up to us now in a TikTok feed, and we'll make a tweak on that and feel like we've invented something new. I don't know if there's much new, actual, original things out there, maybe new ways of looking at it, but perhaps how our brains are picking it up. Maybe you're tapping into a frequency out there that artists and creative people like yourself can use to fuel. I think it's kind of neat. And the other thing...
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead. I'll go back to this.
Okay, I'll tell a story. Don't forget your funny thing, because I want to hear your funny thing. So we're talking about memories, and I've done work as a subject matter expert for all levels of court in Canada here on use of force, firearms, or weapons-related issues, and keeping credentials up. You do use of force experts workshops and seminars, and sometimes they talk about how memories are formed and how oftentimes we are our own worst witness, and the memories can be completely different from different perspectives. Sometimes people will block things out entirely, and there's lots of parts of my childhood that I just don't remember. I remember riding the bus to a school, and the Oklahoma City bombing was in the news, and I was reading this newspaper, and I had what they call a flashbulb memory. And I was like a child in a room that was completely engulfed on fire. And I came home, and it just felt really weird and very strong. And I asked my mom, and I said, this really weird thing, and I was in this room, was completely engulfed in fire. And she says, well, yeah, you were at a sleepover at your friend's house, and their Christmas tree caught on fire, and you guys were all up, and the firefighters came in the middle of the night, and I'd blocked all of that out. But in my memory, I can remember there was a fishbowl with matches in it. And I don't want to think it, but I'm wondering how that tree lit on fire or caught on fire. And right. And why maybe that memory is blocked out. Yeah. But she says, when I was dropped off, they'd plunk me down on the ground, and I'd stare at the wall. They'd pick me up and move me and stare at the wall. And like, was he abused? Like, what happened? Right. And went back the next day, and they talked to them. I didn't want to get out of the car for whatever reason. And, so who knows what was going on there, but the way memories are formed and how much of that memory is actually accurate if I had blocked so much of that out.
It is interesting.
So I want to hear your...
Oh, well, I was going to say, when you were saying how, what I might be tuned in with as a creative or an artist, I'd always had this aversion to referring to myself as an artist. Although I will say, I think now I would consider myself that, because I'm actually trying to say something that's subjective and unique to me. But when I talked to the scientist after he scanned my brain, and he was like, telling me basically why I was a bit of an odd duck, he's like, what do you do at Black Rifle? I was like, oh, well, I'm the art director. I have like a group of, pirates underneath me, and we make coffee bags and stuff. And why? He's like, because your brain looks and behaves like an engineer's brain. Not what, because they'd scanned a lot of people's brains by this point, and it wasn't. This is not like an astrology reading, and they didn't present it as like empirical evidence. They were just saying, "Hey, this is what we've done. We've scanned all these different brains. This is what they did. If we look at 99% of people who are engineers or scientists, people who have that kind of predilection towards building things." Their brain looks like yours. The brains of people who are supposedly the artists look like something completely different. And so that's the weird hybrid that I've always been. And that's part of also this whole thing with Code of the West of like, I just didn't fit in anywhere. And I think that's part of the reason why I sort of sought this sovereignty for myself, because the world loves to categorize things and box you in and tell you what you are. It's ADHD. It's I was supposed to when I was supposed to be learning how to speak as a child, I had ear infections. So I thought I could talk because I was modeling what I'd heard. Turns out I was talking gobbledygook. So I had to go to a deaf school when I was supposed to be learning how to read. So that by the time that I showed up in first grade, I guess you just aren't. I remember thinking this as a kid. The teacher didn't teach us how to read. She just was like, go and read this simple book, see Jane run or whatever. And I was like, I can't read. And she's like, well, I guess it sucks to be you. She told my mom that he's not going to learn how to read and he's probably not going to make it through school and kind of sorry. And that was that. And I just panicked because I didn't clearly know how to read, but I knew that it was important. Like my grandpa had a basement full of books, and I just knew that I needed that information. And my mom was pretty transparent with me. She's like, "This is what they're saying. This is what we're going to figure out." And I was just browbeaten, and I was crying on my grandpa's waterbed. I don't know, people might not know what a waterbed is, but it's basically a big balloon you slept on. And I was crying so hard that I was like rocking in a wave on the waterbed. And he's like, "We're going to figure it out." My mom said the same thing. And I got into a remedial reading class, and within weeks I was reading. And out of spite for this woman who I won't name, but I remember her name well, who was my first grade teacher. I don't know if you had Book It in Canada, but Pizza Hut had this program back in the day where if you okay, I slayed Book It. I absolutely destroyed Book It. I was getting personal pan
because you get the pizza.
Yeah, just I'm getting personal pan pizzas like left and right, and it was just like out of spite, just pure elementary school rage. And so I consumed so many books that by the time I was about second or third grade, I was reading Kenneth Roberts. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He wrote The Northwest Passage and Rabble in Arms. Was mostly like a 18th century historical fiction guy. I would basically put it to you simply, I was reading way above my reading level. But the reason why I bring this up is not to brag about reading adult books when I was a kid. It's to say that like the adults or an adult in my life said, "Nope, this is the category you're in. You are not smart. You didn't show up smart. Therefore, you remain not smart." And so that was probably the first moment in my life where I'm like, don't trust the adults. Do what you have to do. And I was obsessed with Teddy Roosevelt from a really early age because of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Again, I don't know if anybody remembers that, but there was an episode where Indy goes to Africa and meets Teddy, and I just became enamored. And he had asthma, like I had asthma, and I was just like, I'm gonna just do the Teddy Roosevelt thing and just I'm not going to talk like a sailor, so I'm trying to think of a way of saying this. I'm going to physically exert my will upon the world around me and attempt to go to uncomfortable places in an effort to be the thing that I want to be. And I might fail, probably, but we're talking that foundationally, I was just like, no, bro. Like, I'm not feeling this whole asthma thing. I'm not feeling the not reading thing. I'm going to go and I'm going to at least try. And it's terrifying in a weird way to look back at this and go like, for one, why am I this way? Like, what compelled me to defiantly say, no, I'm going to figure this out? And alternatively, what would have happened if I hadn't had that? And so that's part of the impetus of Code of the West is just like, you might be 40, you might be 70, you might be 17, you might be 6, hopefully not, but reading Code of the West. But it's like, I'm hoping, even though I can't name that sort of mojo woo-woo thing that I'm talking about, I'm not going to worry about the fact that I don't know what it is and I can't perfectly put it in a can and try to sell it or present it to people. It's more like, hopefully I can just sort of, in whatever way, shape, or form, like pass on the honorable yet defiant sovereign sense of myself to other people.
Okay, I'm taking notes as we go through here. You're bringing up a lot of really cool
Yeah, sorry.
points. No, this is awesome.
I sit around and think a
I mean,
lot.
clearly, and there's so much value in what you're putting out, and you're able to distill that through your Instagram feed and provide people that same value on a daily basis, because not everybody has the ability to sit around and think a lot. I think everyone,
They are very lucky for that.
most people, well, most people have the capacity, not everyone, but
Sure,
most people
yeah.
have the capacity. Not everybody, and maybe that's not the right way to say it. Not
I
everyone
know
has
what
the
you mean. I
ability,
think your
because
audience will know too. It's a predilection. You know, it's like I think that, not to get off your thing. I'll say real quick about drawing or writing or anything or hunting. People will say like, "Oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I had your talent." It's like, yeah, you could if your interest aligned with what I'm doing, you would obsessively learn how to do it too.
and again, happiness would be a byproduct of that, of the work that you're putting in. I was asked to speak at a university in California, and I was talking with the professor ahead of time, and about the idea what one man can do, another person can do, and he brought up some very valid points about people like with severe schizophrenia. Maybe they're not going to have the same tools. I'm like, okay,
Or
okay,
bipolar or something
fair
like
enough. Right. I wasn't maybe looking at it in the same way. What one person can do, most people can do,
that.
or at the very least, I think everybody can look at their current position and say, how can I take that one small step towards something that's desirable in my life, which I'm not doing right now? So it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to be a star athlete or everyone's going to be a great thinker. But wherever they are right now, tomorrow, they can be one small step closer. And if they don't do that step the next day, but they do it again the day after that, not to beat themselves up, because the macro of those tiny little steps is crazy.
Yeah, the
And
best time
you
to plant
talk
a
about
tree was 20 years ago. The next best time to do it is today.
is right today. Well, you talk about labels and how harmful labels can be. So I was diagnosed severe ADHD. Mind you, even to this day, despite having a lot of indicators that would suggest that I have that, I still question. Although some of my family and friends would say, no, you
How
got
old
it,
are
right?
you?
But I still question. I am 46, turning 47.
Okay, so you're a few years older than me, but we're, I think, pretty much dealing with the same level of assessment. You know, at the time, the ADHD is kind of that.
Probably.
We're in that era of like, give them some Ritalin.
That's right. That's 100% what it was. So I remember one person saying to me, has there ever been a time in your life when you didn't feel like you had ADHD? Because almost every single day you talk about music in the head, there is a constant washing machine of sound and music that's playing as you're talking right now. Bjork did a song called Pluto, I think it is, and it's not a great song, but when I listen to it, it's like, that's kind of the feeling that I hear in my head constantly in the background. Has there ever been a time when I don't feel that? Well, yeah, actually. And I list off a few different times when I haven't felt that. And they say, well, if that's the case, then do you really have ADHD? Like if you have these times when you're able to have everything calm and in tune, and those times are generally always when I'm out in nature, maybe it's just a natural response of your body being physically in a place where your mind isn't at ease or at rest. So that's an interesting way to look at it.
Oh, to
But
echo that.
the
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say the worrisome thing about labels is that so many people buy into them. I mean, people are like, well, I'm going to go get my kid diagnosed. I'm pretty sure they got the tism. Well, maybe they do, right? But maybe diagnosing them just gives them an out where they never want to try again. For some reason, you and I had that drive within us to say, screw you, I'm pushing forward. I don't care what you say. And for me, I think it was deeply rooted in sort of an oppositional, defiant sort of perspective, where I would comply without capitulating because I want to do things my own way, come hell or high water. And that built into something that isn't the easy path, but it creates a path that at least I can call my own and I can be proud of.
You bring something up there that at the end that I think is, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about it. I had a very strong sense of my identity as Chris Hunt, as an early age, and what I mean by that is that like I never really viewed myself sort of in a meta awareness way as a part of a unit. I just always viewed myself as Chris, like a brain in a jar, basically. Not that I'd had that language at that time. So like it never really occurred to me that there's like a one size fits all for anything. But people not only want the ease of the explanation, but they oftentimes want the identity that goes along with it, because it also makes that part of it easier too. Even with the TISM, it's almost become, even just saying that, as much as I enjoy saying the TISM,
right.
And and I've probably taken a half dozen self-assessments, and it's 50-50, every time. And
Sure.
Okay, if it was one way or the other, it doesn't matter to me. It's just more like, okay, that's a data point. But I think that you and I, it sounds like we didn't, like, I never really wanted to belong in a group, but I was curious to be in a group. Like, I wanted to have friends. I wanted to feel belonging to something, but I didn't want to lose my identity alongside of it. And it seems like not everybody, but from an early age, it seemed like a lot of the people around me wanted to identify in, not only in simple terms, but in ways that allowed them to just sort of group by osmosis in a way. Like, where it's like, hey, I don't have to really fight to have my people. Like, I mean, we're humans, we're tribal. We want the support. We don't want to get kicked away from the fire. Hell, we want to be invited by the fire. I feel like I'm the person who would have been like a Strider, in Lord of the Rings or something. I would have been that person where it's like everybody else is sitting around the fire shivering, and there's just like, why is there like a fire like 30 feet away in the dark? And it'd just be like me just there under like skins and just like staring into the fire by myself, and like with maybe some sort of like giant dire wolf like next. I don't know. I mean, like, I'm just saying, like, it if it means losing myself versus appeasing a larger system, from an early age, I was like, fuck the system. And I don't mean that like in a punk rock sort of way. I mean it from like a truly almost epistemological way, where it's like, it just didn't jive with me. And I wonder, because sometimes evolutionary biologists will have this debate about like what are the most beneficial traits for, like, say, like a chimpanzee to have. Is it the ability to create tools, or is it the ability to copy the chimps that create tools? And because the logic being that, cool, if you have one good invention and you make a flint flake, or a flint knife you can scrape hides with, cool, you contributed something to the better good of the group of chimps. If you're the kind of like clever chimp that's walking around going like, yeah, okay, a scraper, an axe, what are you doing with that atlatl thing? Suddenly you're the super chimp if you can copy all the different things. And I'm not saying that's who I am. I'm just saying that, like, as far as traits go, maybe you and I just have something different, and that's okay. And I think for a long time, I saw the things that I was struggling with as weaknesses because I was struggling with them. And as I got older, and certainly as I started doing Code of the West, like, Code of the West actually, beyond just being a framework for myself, is the first time where I'm like, oh, that's how this could work. Meaning me, like, like, the only thing that makes sense to me that I could do with my life is Code of the West, because it is the intersection of writing and drawing and video and talking to people and growth and philosophy, all the things that I've always had to sort of like compartmentalize in my life. And so it's not so much that like only I could make Code of the West. It's more like anybody, a lot of people could do what I'm doing. It's just that for me, I finally found the structure that, the only kind of structure that would work for me, basically.
You talk about, sure, I'd want to have friends. Growing up, did you have friends?
Yeah, not really. I mean, kind of yes, but what did you?
No,
Yeah,
not
okay.
I had
Yeah, I mean, I was around adults. I was on a truck, so if I wasn't sick in the hospital,
mhm.
I was on a truck with my dad in the summertime. He was a high value product truck driver, did a bit of household too, but I was going back and forth across the United States, coast to coast, multiple times a summer, um, in a truck, and so I'd come back, in first grade, leave, go for the summer, come back in second grade, and I'd see some of the same faces, and they'd be like, teacher would be like, "What'd you do this summer?" And these kids would be like, "We went to Disneyland," or "We went to the Wisconsin Dells," and they'd
Mhm.
get to me and be like, "I saw a man die next to the buffet at the Petro Iron Skillet, in Indianapolis,"
Yeah.
or I saw Mount St. Helens, like I almost got kidnapped in New Jersey. It was like I didn't know how to talk to kids as a kid, because
Uh-huh.
I'd already it's like the world had been trying to kill me through asthma and allergies. I'm fighting to learn how to talk. I'm fighting to learn how to read. Like, I just kind of can't. I was like an outside dog that showed up like in elementary school, and then they were just like, "You need to kind of just be cool, man." And I'm just like, I got that
Mm.
dog in me. Like, it's like I didn't know. I didn't care about the Power Rangers or I mean, I like Batman and Star Wars, but I
Sure.
just I was ready to go. I mean, you could ask my mom, and she would tell you that like at 8, 9 years old, I was like, man, why can't I have a car? I just want to go sit at the coffee shop and read and write.
Yeah.
I want to go where I want to go right now. I wanted agency from a very early age, and other kids just wanted to like I don't know, like eat pizza and watch movies, which was fun when I got to experience it finally. But I didn't really get a friend until I was more like junior high. I had people who I'd have sleepovers with or something every once in a while, but they weren't that interesting to me. Like I was wanting to prepare for life. I was wanting to get out and start doing shit.
Mhm. I think my story is probably pretty similar. And what that does when you have a different life experience and a different perspective, it puts you on the outside. And when you're on the outside and have a personality type that doesn't necessarily want to be on the inside, it can put you at odds with those social structures that everyone naturally
Mhm.
will kind of want to group towards. And if they can't put a label on you and understand you, oftentimes people will fear what they don't understand.
Mhm.
And what they fear, they'll
They'll
reject.
exclude.
And so they'll exclude. And so it's no slight on the people around me. I put myself in that situation based on my own stubbornness and not wanting to conform to I'd look at these things and I'd consider them childish. And like when I was in grade 4, I was reading college level chemistry books because I was really interested in
Oh
making
man.
things like disappearing ink with phenolphthalein solution, making your own gunpowder, nitrocellulose compounds. If it blew up, had an endothermic, exothermic reaction, or it could kind of disappear, that was cool. That was science to me, right?
Mhm.
That's chemistry. And I had set up my grade 4 teacher is like, I can't control this kid. So we put puzzles and games at the back, and he can have his chemistry lab, and during lunch breaks, he can teach chemistry. And so that's what I would do.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, that was a good teacher. That was a teacher who could realize that, okay, he's not super great in these areas. Rather than trying to make him better, we're going to double down on the things that he's showing a lot of aptitude for.
Mhm.
And that's something that I try to do with my kids. Um, but I also, I don't ever want to lose sight of the fact that, like I was told I couldn't do math. I was told that reading will be a challenge for me. And like you, I persevered and overcame. And even in recent years, I look at things like the Adobe suite. How do you use After Effects and Premiere Pro and Photoshop? Like this is a completely new language. And one day I just like, you know what? I'll do it. And there's a light bulb switch and I'm proficient enough to put out content now.
You
So
found the reason to do it.
found the reason. There's a proper external or internal stimulus that moved me forward. And it's the understanding, and people like to talk about neuroplasticity. It's the understanding that you can always learn something new and your brain is always expanding.
Damn that thing. Yes, 100%. Yeah, no, I get the old MV7 mute. Because I think about the neuroplasticity thing a lot, and I've thought about it since I was a pretty young person, and I think that, like, I'd almost, man, like 40 minutes ago, you asked like how, where that place was that I was in, and I didn't get out of it for like 15 years. And it got to the point where right before I was going to Black Rifle, when I told you that I realized I probably shouldn't drink all the time and do these other things, I realized that I was living in an unintegrated way, meaning that I needed both parts of myself in a room, but I had divided myself into a workaholic, this thing that we're talking about, this kid grown up, that is just like, I'm going to do my thing. I'll see y'all down the line. Peace. That's great. It works really well to do exceptional things, but it doesn't do well to be a normal human. And that's when you see, that's what I missed out on anyways. It was the modeling that occurred, of like, this is just how you do normal. And, and so I didn't know how to be that obsessive driven person and also keep my house clean and, exercise, cook for myself. And I got the inclination around 2019 ish. That was like, oof, like, I don't know how to do basic human things. And it's embarrassing, to not know how to cook. It's embarrassing I knew I could do my laundry. I knew how to clean dishes, but it's like part of my thing too is with the cooking is I get overwhelmed, kind of like with the Adobe suite, where it's like, I'd go and try to look something up on the internet, and it's like, I need the foundational explanation of the logic of a stovetop. Like, I don't know what the hell 1 through 4 actually is, especially when the recipe's like, put it on low. I'm like, what's low? No one's
That's
explaining low
subjective
to me. Like, low could be 1, low could be 4, because it's below the halfway point. What does low mean? And so I would get frustrated just trying to do simple things like that. And I realized that I'm gonna have to go and do what I used to do, and I'm just gonna have to go ask people. I'm gonna have to be vulnerable enough to be like, hey, I'm kind of sort of retarded in these ways, or retarded in these ways from not having been exposed to them, and not for lack of trying, not for like, my mom got really upset actually because she thought that she let me down or something. And I was like, Mom, you were a single mom. I was a latchkey kid. You could only do so much to prepare me. It's like, if I didn't learn how to cook a pork chop, I did all these other things as a byproduct of what you did teach me. I can learn how to cook the pork chop now, but it took the integration and realizing that I'm not two different people. I'm not a worker bee, and I'm not like this stunted, basic human that doesn't know how to do things. It's like, I'm just Chris. I'm a person that knows how to be driven and doesn't know how to cook for themselves. It's the same person. But for whatever reason, and I, for years in my head, saw myself in this binary dualistic way. And it's like, oh, well, I just need to figure out, I need to look at it from the perspective of like, how do I make a better me? And the me that can take care of my space, the me that can cook for myself, maybe it'll have a good effect on my career. And it did, but it kind of brought me back to this place where I was like, it brought me back to that 6-7-year-old version of me where I'm just like, you know what? I don't care about a lot of this stuff. Like, I care about like is being, on your happiness thing. I had a friend who was in that friend group that lost the 2 guys, and I was helping her move to Portland and from Boise, and I was driving a U-Haul for her. And this is about a year after it had happened, and I was like learning how to fight and mixed martial arts stuff. It was a weird time. It was enjoyable, but also painful at times.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, Chris, what makes you happy? Like, that's the question she asked me. And not, are you happy, but what makes you happy? And I'm sitting there driving that U-Haul and I'm like, son of a bitch, I can't answer that question with a single thing. And so for years after that, which I would say this is another path towards Code of the West, is that like I started trying to figure out what the answers were to that. And as I started accumulating things on that list, they weren't big. It was things like sitting in a room and reading a book, or sitting in a room when it's raining outside, or sitting in the grass on a spring day. It was like things that were achievable. I just didn't make time for. And that was also kind of like a blow to me when I started making that list and realizing that I'm just not doing these things. And I'd always been this advocate of agency, where it's like, if you have a dream and you want to go and build your publishing business, or you want to build a concrete business, and you're not doing it, and you got 2 legs and 2 arms and no excuses, you could go and do it. I realized, like, man, it's not, I don't even have the ability to say that I was making excuses. I didn't even stop to think about just structuring something good for me into my life.
Everyone wants to be motivated. They're like, I'm super motivated to do something, or I'm looking for some external motivator. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to do whatever it might be. And I think your Code of the West kind of hits on a process which can lead to motivation through discipline. If we just take those little steps, because motivation is fleeting. Mm-hmm. Discipline is something that it's tangible. It's something that you can control, and it's great. It's something you can work towards. Mm-hmm. And if there's a roadmap in place, and you can say, I'm going to try this roadmap a little bit, and you're not making any promises of what's at the end of the roadmap.
Well, I call it a compass. It's a compass to me, because a map is predetermined. And, that's the thing that the gurus and the Instagram pages, I think, sell, is the map. And that's like, I don't believe that everybody's map is the same. And so I think it's more like, a compass is not biased. A compass just tells you where north is. And so it just helps everybody navigate that. If you know how to read a map, if you know where you're trying to go, the compass helps you get there, but it doesn't tell you where to go. And that's where I think that a lot of this sort of modern hustle grind culture, it's about like you where you want to go, where you need to go. That's the top of that mountain where you got $1 million and you got 100,000 Instagram followers and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I climbed my mountain in my 20s going into comics, and I got there and I was like, shit, it's not what I thought it was going to be. And I wasn't happy. And then I had to step back and be like, so if I've spent the past 17 years building my identity around my dream, and I got to my dream and I got it. I got my graphic novel printed, published, won an award, and I'm not happy, I can either double down on not being happy, or I can step back and realize, or I can step back and find a way to be happy. And it's like the sunk cost bias, when you're playing poker and you're like all in or almost all in on a shitty hand, and like that river comes and you're like, I'm not going to lose this and I can't bluff this, or I'm not going to win this and I can't bluff my way through this. So do you go all in, or do you just save what little bit you have? And I was like, it was hard, but I was like, I'm going to have to walk away from comics because this is not making me happy. It's hard choices like that. The map would tell you, double down, keep going, be miserable because you're just being weak. You're being, who's going to carry the boats, or who's going to draw the comics. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, maybe you step back and you decide you do want to keep going. That's fine too. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I don't adhere to this notion that there's one way to do things. I would say that for me, Code of the West is just an encouragement and saying that, like, the one thing that I know for sure is don't stop looking for the thing that works.
So there's something that I look at and I try to apply to my life faster than I have in the past, but it's to stop, regroup, and choose a more desirable course of action. Now, that more desirable course of action might just
Fail
be on
fast.
that same path that you were on before. Fail fast,
Literally have it
fail
tattooed on
hard,
my
fail
arm.
often. Do you really?
Yeah.
I
Fail
believe
fast.
in that 100%. I love it. Yeah. So many people are afraid of failure. Why? And the more you fail, the more you realize, man, I'm not made out of glass. I
Mm-hmm.
can actually get back up again. And that's where the strength comes from. People will look at their failures and say, well, what will other people think of me? What will my family, my
Who gives
friends,
a shit?
or people online? Yeah, people you've never even met before, but they're going to have an opinion about whatever it might be. Fail fast, hard, fail often. The people who are truly successful that I know are the ones who've tried all these different options and failed hard but gotten back up.
Well, on the thing about the who cares what people think about you too, anyways, I will say, I mean, so I'm in spitting distance of 300,000 people on Instagram now, and that's cool. It's an interesting data point. I can count on two hands how many times I've had someone like get real mean or nasty ever on Code of the West in the comments. And
Huh.
for real, like, and I mean, I've blocked some people. Like, people, if people want to show up and try to stir like the pot, I'm just like, nah. Like juice ain't worth the squeeze. I'm not going to feed the troll. But that's kind of the point. Is I don't give any fertile ground in there to let that stuff sort of foster and grow. And I think that that's a reflection of my brain. Like, because what you're talking about with like, failing, what's it look like, people's perception of it. It's like, well, I'm going to be my own worst critic no matter what. I know that about myself. So there's not much that anybody else can make me feel worse about. Now, I don't like disappointing people. I will say that. And if a troll shows up that's just like, I thought this thing and then it didn't work out, and I feel like you lied to me. There's a or not that happens that often, but it's like that framework will kind of bum me out and be like, did I really do that? That sucks. And if I did do something wrong, then I'll admit to it. But um, it's more like realizing that it's you can't control other people's perceptions of you or your path. And so social media has this way of sort of hyper spinning that judgment cycle up, but it also, like, that's like a big what do they call those things that used to go "Wee," like you spin them around and like they make like you could like blow
Yeah,
them
yeah, the clackers.
yeah, like
Okay, yeah.
it's movement, it's sound, it's distracting, but at the end of the day, it's like, what is that thing? We can't even remember what it's called, but like, I mean, it's a perfect analogy in a way because it's like, what is this? Like, I mean, okay, cool. Like, you're making a lot of noise, but like, does this have a value? Does this have a purpose to it? Like, because I don't see it, and so, it basically once you remove when you untether yourself, I found this. I don't know how you feel about it, but if you untether yourself from the scaffoldings that do show up in the frameworks, that are kind of just like there, the like, well, this is how we've done it for a while. So, if you have an Instagram account and someone does show up and they're an asshole to you, you should be an asshole back, or not. Maybe you're just like, ignore it, or maybe you go, well, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, or you send them a DM, be like, hey, I know I don't know you, but doesn't seem like you're doing okay. Whatever. Like, we have a prescriptive sort of like process or flow to these things that, especially with the internet, it's like you and I grew up in a different way before the internet showed up. Like, no elbows on the table, don't wear hats inside. We're both violating that rule right now.
Yeah, we
And
are. Well, I get
and
reflection off the top of my head from the lights.
I'm look like a crazy person without a hat on right now. Like,
Yeah.
like, but there's this slow gradual, like we adapted. Oops, sorry. We adapted to this world. We weren't born into it. And so it's our responsibility, I feel, and this is part of Code of the West, is like, people want to lament and talk about Gen Z all the time and be like, oh, they're just always on their phones, they're always doing this. It's like, so what are we doing to help them. You know, if this world that they've inherited from us is performative, it's judgmental, or they think that it's performative and judgmental because the system that they've been born into is this big ass structure that is just this thing we're spinning around that doesn't really do anything, you know? And so, and we're, you know, like if all we're doing is just saying, oh, you shouldn't put that much stock in these things. Well, they're putting all the stock in it because they're not like us. They literally don't have a frame of reference for what the world existed like before all of this existed that we're talking on right now. The reason why Code of the West exists, the reason why you have your platform, you need to, are you good?
No, I just saw a shadow move by, and
Squirrel.
But we're good. I remembered I got a text earlier that someone's going to be dropping by the studio here.
I guess what I'm saying is that, like, that's part of this whole thing is that there's just there is no, like, somehow we got this point where all the manners, all the things that we used to grow up and learn, we just decided not to pass them on for some reason. You know, like, and I don't know why, because now we have this giant megaphone where we can talk to each other and communicate. And instead of being like, hey, you know what? It used to be kind of, we'll go like, old gray mare, she ain't what she used to be. Like, I wish Canada was like this. I wish America was like this. It used to be like this. Instead, why not go like, hey, this is what I think it should be.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Like, or hey, if you're struggling with this, this is something that we used to do, or this is something that I do. I'm not saying everybody goes and makes Code of the West or Code of the East or Code of the Southwest or whatever, but it's like, I do that version of it, like, you know, or your version. It's just like how, like, when you're optimizing for attention, you're not really optimizing for evolution in any way, you know? And so you'll see people copying and parroting a lot of these influencers about here's how you get millions of dollars and freedom or whatever. And it's like, okay, I get why Gen Z's doing shit like this, because that's all they're seeing. If they don't have grandpa, I had grandpas that were self-made and, you know, in business. And I had a grandpa that was just old school, putting your head down, go to work, get your retirement. You know, I had examples of people around me that had different ways of going through life and succeeding. And if we're not trying to, like, this is something I haven't articulated very well, so I'll kind of leave it at this because it's an incomplete thought. But like, we just sort of let the old world dissipate, and then this superstructure supplanted it with that is the internet, and then all of us were sitting around going like, well, why is everything broken? Like, why isn't anything working the way that it used to? It's like, because we sledgehammered the shit out of everything and just brushed, and we just broomed the dust of everything that used to be off the foundation, and we just have this Rube Goldberg overly complex device that we use to do really simple things, which is just talk to each other.
And you just hit the nail on the head right there. And the number of people in the younger generation that are so hyper connected through social media, through all the different little apps and Snapchats, WeChat, whatever the different things that they're using, but so isolated from each other at the same time. And their process that they know for interaction is going to be based on what's been modeled before them, what their friends do. And when you talk about dealing with a hater, somebody comes in with a lot of negativity, and the natural knee-jerk response is to come in and try and cut them down or tell them why they're wrong. It's not to stop, regroup, and choose, or explain yourself. No, this is what I meant. And then you're sucked into this trap of it. To be able to shift that completely, and one of the easiest ways, you've just mentioned it there, you'll just, on the side, DM a person. What I do, so I run a company, Silvercore Outdoors. We're very well reviewed, but every once in a while, you're going to run into somebody who's got an issue with something. He can't please all of the people all of the time.
And we might genuinely also mess up sometimes too.
Well, and that's it. We're not perfect. And there are times that we've made mistakes and we've misstepped, and we need to hear about it and be able to move forward in a positive way. But what I do, whenever possible, is I find that person's phone number and I give them a phone call. And I'll say, listen, I'm genuinely curious about your perspective. If a negative review is left or an angry email or whatever it might be, and the staff that work with me, they say, I don't know how you do it. They were so angry before and now they were singing our praises and they love us. And I say, well, it's simple. I call them up and then I listen to what they have to say. And then I say, okay, so let me understand. Here's what I'm hearing. Is that correct? And they'll say, yes. And I'd like to add this. Okay. And I write it all down. And I say, well, let's see what we can do to make this better. Right. Or sometimes there's going to be situations. I remember one girl and I said, look at it. I've looked, you've got a pattern of leaving negative reviews for people. And I spent probably more time than I should have looking at all of this stuff that you have here. How is that working out for you? It looks like you got fired from this job. It looks like you had, based on these different personality things. Like, how's that working out for you? I'm not asking you to take the review down.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely curious. And she came back. I said, look, we can't help you in what you're looking for help on, unfortunately. But doesn't mean that we can't treat you like a human and see what's going on. And she came back with the most glowing review afterwards and said, oh, Travis gave me a reality check and I really appreciate it. That wasn't my intention, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't my intention, even though she was quite upset at first, like, holy crow, how do you know all these things about where I worked? So, well, you didn't leave a number and you left this whole thing anonymously and I had to figure out who you are. So I may have ADHD that a little further down the road, but had a human connection and a very positive outcome. And I find the younger generation is fearful of just picking up the phone and saying, hey, like what's up?
This is something I've been thinking about more because I think that you're inevitably going to always have that sort of generational conflict. As you're older, and I shouldn't say conflict. We think that every time we think that since I was a kid, every older generation has said something negative about the generation that comes up behind them or the subsequent generations below them. And it's like, okay, the only thing that seems to be consistent here is that everybody thinks that everybody that's younger than them is an idiot. And to me, the only thing that's actually consistent is that the world's just continually changing. And the frameworks that we have, for ourselves, what made sense in 1999 does not make sense in 2025 in some ways. But the base frameworks, things that I'm talking about with Code of the West all the time, it's like, in theory, they could operate in 2139, because it's just about, like, it's not about the specificity and the nuance of the culture. It's about what's it like to be a part of a community, and there's and that's why it's to me, I view it as a compass and not a map, because it's something that's going to evolve. Society, interaction, how we do it. We might just be talking through radio signals and just staring at each other on a podcast in 30 years because we're just everybody's in their brains about it or something. I don't know. But I think
Neuralink.
Yeah, exactly. But with Gen Z, I think that, much like we're the first generation to have lived in both worlds, they're the first generation that's only lived in that one, this current one, rather, I should say. And the other world existed. Even though it changed and shifted, it existed pretty much for all of humanity prior to this moment. It's like, okay, we got the telephone, we got airplanes, we've got, the 20th century is pretty dope, but it was more like refined versions of communication methods that we'd, been, aspiring towards for a long time. Jesus Christ. Like, we have AI. Like, we have actual AI that can think it's self-emergent. Like, it's not just some novelty of, like, find me a recipe. It's like, you can have a debate with an AI about its sovereignty and its own existence. If you told me that when I was 9 years old, for one, I'd been like, hell yeah, where's the hoverboard and the flying DeLoreans? But what I'm getting at is that, like, you mentioned legacy earlier. and you have kids, I think you said, and I don't, to my
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. But this idea of legacy, I think, goes beyond just. I think oftentimes we see legacy as wanting some sort of reassurance that to ourselves that when we die, we feel like we've had some sort of impact, or we're leaving some impression of our time here behind after we're gone. And for me, I think it's more like the sun could I could go full Armageddon, Bruce Willis, go up with my oil rigging friends, blow up the asteroid that's going to destroy the Earth. They could put statues of us in every city, in every country of the world, and at some point the sun's going to explode. You know, like regardless of how long those statues stay, like at some point it's
Sure.
just gone. And so you could argue that there's more value in time, for how long people remember you, if you're Gilgamesh or Beowulf. I'd argue that it doesn't matter. It matters like when you are like, I think about like the greatest mystery and exploration that I'll ever have in my life is like death. And as macabre as this sounds, like I think about death a lot, but not in like a dark way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, okay, it's you said early on in the podcast, it's inevitable. It's the one thing that we all can't avoid. So for me, I just want to know that when it happens, like I didn't leave anything on the mat, and the legacy that I want to leave behind is more of what it means to just live well and live as an individual and die with not, no one's going to die without regrets, but I think it's important. I think it's important to die well. Like I said about Lauren, and helping him. Like Michael died alone with a lot of drugs and alcohol in his system in a switch yard outside of Portland. Lauren died surrounded by family, slowly, albeit, but with a chance to talk and say goodbye and come to terms with it. It's like we don't always get to control the way that we die, but we can control to a large degree how we live up until that point. And I think that's the legacy that I want to leave behind.
I think you're doing a damn good job of putting the work in to be able to leave that legacy.
Trying.
Where do you see the future of Code of the West?
There's stuff that's like I haven't signed in any NDAs about anything, but I have a habit of not wanting to count my chickens before they hatch. So
Smart.
as far as what I can control, I'm trying to carve out time to write another book that's not just like a sequel to the manual is basically an epistemology. It's just a way of explaining things
Mm-hmm.
that, all the people in my life that we've talked about, that they sort of intuited, that they're not going to have, like, just because Stoicism lines up a lot with Code of the West doesn't mean that the people that taught me the code knew who Marcus Aurelius was, So it's like, I kind of wanted to sort of structure it, but now I want to have sort of like an actual document that could help young people, especially. Like, I keep thinking like the big book of shit you should know. That's stuff like that. I had a hard time with things like how to cook and how to, change tires and, manners and different things like that. So I want to continue to write and publish books that have value that can be referenced. And then I want to I want to document other people's stories more. This is where I'm being careful about one of those eggs that could hatch. I would like to. I'd like to go and talk to people and meet them where they are and work alongside them and have the chance to show people that things that I talk about are not gone. Show not tell more, that there are people who still, even though I think that Code of the West aspires to, or I aspire with Code of the West to basically make a modern myth, in that a myth is not an accurate, factual, play-by-play storytelling method. It's romanticized. It's a lesson, more than anything. And so I think that it's very important to tie it together and show that, like, yes, it might be a myth, but there's still a component of it that is real. And I really want to physically get people together. Something I can tell you that I don't have any qualms about saying is that I live in northern Idaho, outside of a town called Sandpoint, and I'm officially on the board of directors now for the PRCA Rodeo that happens every year in Sandpoint here. And as a part of this,
Cool.
It's cool. I'm excited. And so, as a part of the arrangement that I have is, we're not rebranding the rodeo. It's still the Sandpoint Rodeo, but I get to say that this is the Code of the West Rodeo. If you want to come and see Code of the West in person or experience it in some way, August of 2025 is going to be the first time. I don't know, everybody wants to show up in Sandpoint, Idaho. It's kind of out of out of the way, but I want to start doing things that are more in person. Ideally, find a way to allow people to have their own agency to start, Code of the West, I don't know, book clubs, or, I mean, I haven't had a chance to really build it the way I wanted it to yet, but it's like, it just needs to be real. It can't be theoretical, alone. And so that's part of where it's going, figuring that stuff out, getting my podcast going again. And just, that's more of just a habit thing. I got all that stuff worked out. And then it could get pretty interesting by the end of the summer here if everything goes the way that it's looking, and so this, I don't think there's any harm in saying, like, I'm doing a collection drop with Huckberry. So, like, I'm basically putting something together with them that's going to be a combination of Code of the West, shirts, hats, but also tools.
Cool.
and things that are with brands. I will wait to say the brands just because we haven't decided anything or anything, but like things like knives, like Jack shirt. I got to be careful, but like things that are useful to people. If you're from the Northwest, if you're from the bush, yeah, like that it's not just an affectation. It's like, it's shit kicker gear that you could just throw in the back of a Subaru if you're somebody who's a white collar person who grew up in Alberta or grew up in Montana, but is doing something new now. Or it could also just be the jacket that you wear, or the gloves that you use, or the tool that you use if you are still, in the shit, so to speak. And then I'm doing some stuff with Boot Barn as well. That's incremental. There's a couple things that we're doing there, and that it's more of like, I didn't look for that, but that happened. And so to me, it's a way of hopefully just extending the opportunity to help people. Ultimately,
I like that a lot. And also, depending on when the dates are in August, I'll go to I'll be there at the rodeo.
That'd be cool. It's like August 1st, I think.
Yeah, okay. My daughter's going off to university, so we'll be juggling a few things there. I don't know what's when the official head-in time is. I should probably look at the calendar.
How far north are you? How far are you from the border?
I'm pretty close. I mean, I'm in Ladner. I mean, the border's 15 minutes away from me, and I drove down. I visited a buddy in Boise, Brad Brooks. He owns a company called Argali, and Zach Hansen, he's written a book called Turning Feral. Actually, Zach, he lent me this Tenkara rod, and I'd never used one of them before. And coming from a fly fishing background, everyone kind of turns their nose up at them. But I had probably one of the best fishing days of my life with this thing. The little compact, little went. I felt like, I felt like Hemingway fishing in the Sawtooth, and let us stay in his cabin in Atlanta. which is
That's
Atlanta,
cool.
Idaho.
So do you go through Bonner's Ferry then, or how do you come down south?
That's a good question. I don't know. I sat in the passenger seat. My wife drove because I hate driving,
I have to
and
ask your wife.
and I put the thing on the old MapQuest on
Yeah,
put it on the Google Maps, and we just camped along the way and fished, and yeah.
very
What
cool.
about Zane Grey? You're familiar with him?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
he's
yeah.
got a
Riders of the Purple Sage, and then obviously the book, The Code of the West.
And he had one quote, so very different, highly influential in his own right, in
Hmm.
romanticizing and creating uh, the the Western culture that so many
Hmm.
movies have been based off of. You've gone and codified a lot of these things that he never did, that kind of make up those points, which is really cool. But he had a quote says, "You can't tell what a man's made of by looking at him. You got to go by what he does," and that I think encapsulates what you're doing.
I appreciate that. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of quotes, and I used to pull a lot of quotes out of Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey, and it's not that I don't find any value in it. It's just that or not that I don't find any value in it anymore. It's just I've realized that I've got more to say than can be just reflected off those quotes in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
But I would agree with Zane Grey. I mean, it's in storytelling they say show don't tell, and which just seems counterintuitive, especially if you're working within words. A lot of times
Mm.
because you have to tell, just so to speak. But that's sort of the little tricks of the trade is learning how to paint a picture with words as opposed to trying to render a photograph with words. And and so and that's after having spent a lot of time learning how to draw, and illustrate more than actually writing prose. Even though I wrote a lot since I was little, it just wasn't the number one thing that I did. But I think that it's funny that you brought that quote up because that's really part of that. The reason why I want to do the thing that I'm being a little dodgy about, as far as going and working alongside people, and showing them that this still exists. I also, as a part of wanting to do that, would be putting myself in situations where by working alongside them, I'm learning things that I haven't done before. And I'm doing things that are not just new to me, but they'd be uncomfortable even to somebody who knew how to do them. And so I'm hoping that
Mm.
because talk is cheap. It doesn't matter how good I've gotten at articulating things in Code of the West. That people believe them, and I'm grateful that most people believe what I'm saying, that I know to be the truth. But there's just a certain level, especially as we're talking about like Gen Z and the other generations. Like, I'm not saying that I want to be that guy. It's just that that I know about myself that if you put a camera on me and you asked me to do something that was really hard, I wouldn't pretend that it well, I wouldn't pretend at all, I guess is what I'm saying. And
Mm-hmm.
and I have no problem with failing, like we talked about earlier. And if no one else will be willing to fail in front of literally everybody, then I'll do it. And that's kind of in a strange way what I'm hoping to be able to do, just because I
Mm.
believe in that quote so much that you referenced from Zane Grey.
Well, I think there's a. I'll show you. I do a little bit of research. I got about 6 pages printed off here of things that I didn't even get to talk to you about, just
We can
because
do
the
it again if you want
conversation
to some
grows.
point.
I think we're gonna have to,
Yeah.
and maybe I bring my kid down and do something at the rodeo there. That could be kind of fun
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. That would
If
be.
I'm, but yeah. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should be talking about?
Like you asked me sort of a similar question before we started, and I think I I just like talking to people and not having an agenda. So there's always things we could talk about, but I don't think that there's anything that we need to talk about, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have links in the description. I'll have links over to your social media, to what you're doing, where people can find you. And maybe we'll call it a wrap there.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris,
Yeah. For the time being.
For the time being, yes. And thank you so much for being on the Silvercore podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I feel lighter. I love the feeling of being able to sit down and you ride that high afterwards and saying, I just had an amazing conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I appreciate it. Thank you.